Hey guys, today we're gonna have a look into how to make pro level drums. On the Patreon you will find a download link for this folder with presets for Serum and Ableton and like all files you need to build your own professional drums. So we're gonna start with loading the Serum and checking the kick preset we made and to see how it works. So we have a basic pattern, and now let's switch off all of the modules and see how to rebuild this kick from the scratch. So it all starts with a simple sine wave from basic shapes. Now we're gonna use LFO1 and envelope mode to modulate the level of the sound, to shape the sound. You can play with the shape of the envelope to make kick longer or shorter, just to set it up to your taste. Also, make sure that phase and random phase in zero position, otherwise you're gonna have the phase issues with your kick drum. Make sure that the LFO is set following the envelope. 1/16 rate is fine, and then make sure that you have some space at the beginning, because that's the area where you're gonna have a click attack of your kick. We recommend to use different analyzers, Exoscope in this case, to see how your kick drums work. So our body is done, and we're gonna use a second oscillator to create the attack of our kick drum. Make sure that phase and random phase is on zero, and then we use this point to control the strength, the level, the hit of our attack. The higher you put it, the stronger attack is, and the lower you put it, the softer attack is. Now let's activate both oscillators and check how our kick sounds. What we're gonna do next is using fine tuning to create the pitch drop. We're gonna use another LFO in the same envelope mode to modulate the pitch of the oscillator. Next step will be adding some noise to create some top end for our kick drum. Then we're gonna use another LFO in envelope mode to modulate the shape of the noise to control its length. You can experiment with different noises, but standard Serum's noises are mono, so we made some stereo noises, and this pack is included in our Patreon pack in this month as well. So I'm quite happy with the foundation of our kick drum, and now let's do some processing. With changing the envelope, you change the texture. You can also play with different types of distortion. So foundation of our kick drum is done, and let's move to the snare. The snare is pretty much the same technique, but with slightly different changes. We're gonna use a sine wave to create the body of our snare, and then I will deactivate all modules to build them from the scratch again. We slightly pitch down the sine wave and use envelope. Then we're gonna use a really short LFO following the envelope 1 to modulate the pitch of the snare of oscillator 1. Next, we're gonna use noise to create tail of our snare, and I'm gonna use LFO2 following the envelope to modulate the level of the noise, the one I picked up from our pack. Then we're gonna use a filter to cut the low frequencies. I'm gonna use envelope to control cutoff of the filter, minus 24 dB. And also you can use different types of noises to create different textures of your snare. So our snare and the kick are done, and let's have a look into different techniques how to make them. This time I'm gonna use kick 2. I'm gonna use racks we made for this month's Patreon giveaway. They consist of a completely finished kick drum and snare, and you can set them up to your taste and change the sound up to your taste. Let's see the kick rack. I'm gonna switch off all of the plugins which processing it, and we're gonna go step by step through this. So we're gonna use a kick 2 as a pure sine wave generator. We don't need any clicks or any extra modules inside, just a pitch and amp envelopes, and that's it. So it can look a little bit tricky, but in pitch envelope, you set up, the pitch drop, the notes, the root notes, and also the length of the sample. So these points here, they respond for the pitch drop of the sound and, how strong is going to be attack and what will be the key of the body of the sound. And, by the time the pitch drops down, what will be the root note. You can easily, change the foundation of your kick or snare to the root note of your track and also adjust the length of the sample according, to your needs. Then in an amp section, we basically draw the modulation of level of the sound pretty much the same as we did the modulation in Serum. So we have this, attack slightly replaced because we're gonna have another click and we're gonna draw the body of the snare. And the further you remove it, the less attack you will have. Then on the next step, we adjust a bit of compression to squash our sound a little bit. And then we add a little bit of tube saturation. You can experiment with settings, but it's done in parallel. Then a bit of EQing in the mid-range. It just shapes sound nicely and give it a little bit of punch. And that's it for the first layer. Our foundation is done, and we move to the second layer, which in this case is loop. So we just select one shot from the loop and layer it with our foundation to get the full kick sound. So let's check it out in solo. And what we've done here, we used the noise from this sound to layer with the kick to give its character and texture. We used very gentle reverb and EQ to just leave the high end to layer with our kick sound, the foundation of kick sound, and let's check out how they sound together. After we have both layers done, it's time to group processing. For this, we use Saturator and Pro L2. So let's start with Saturator to get our sound a bit louder. You can also use trash to instead of saturator and just use its wave shaper. They both will give you pretty identical results. And then the next step is fab filter, where we push our sound a little bit harder. Not too much, but just to get a bit of loudness. And with pretty short look ahead, pretty long attack. And now let's compare both kicks we've made just to see the differences. Okay, now let's see the rack we've made to create the snare drums. We use the same idea of using instrument track, but we have multiple layers and not all of them are active. Some of them are layers we choose, between two to see if you like sample flavor or if you like noise flavor, etc. So let's analyze it from the beginning. So there are a few plugins which are processing the whole group, and there are individual processing on each of the layers. Let's switch it off and check out how it sounds without it. So we use kick to generate the body of our kick drum. We don't use any clicks, just distortion and to bring the beef, and then we set up the lengths and the pitch of the kick drum. It's quite simple. You use the dot here and set up everything here. It's pretty intuitive, so it takes like 10-15 minutes to find out how to do it. So first of all, we use utility to make it mono, and then we add some compression. Next step is EQ. And then some distortion. Then we add a clipper. Standard clip is pretty awesome and very visual. And then the last step in this layer would be a limiter. For this purpose, we use Pro L, and it go pretty crazy here, just to make the sound louder. Moving to layer 2, we're gonna use addictive drums for this one. And the sound we picked up here is not must. You can find any sound you like and get different textures over your snare. As in Serum, we leave a little bit of space at the beginning for attack of our sound. And let's move to processing. First of all, EQ. Then we use corpus to get metallic texture of our snare. Then LFO tool to cut any attack or clicks at the beginning of our sound. And then the last step is limiter. And let's try to play both layers together. Then the next layer is gonna be noise from the serum. Very simple. Here you have LFO following envelope mode, and you can change any noise you like and, up to your taste. And of course, some EQ. Let's pick up different noise and try to play it with the body of our snare together. Now another option is to create a layer from the sample. Nothing special with processing, just a basic EQing. And then there is a layer with a serum's snare, the one we looked earlier. We've added it to the rack so you could combine different bodies, different textures, different layers, and get your unique sound in snares using just one rack. Moving on to the final processing, we use EQ8 to shape the sound. Then a bit of wave shaping in Trash 2. and a bit of limiter to get the maximum of the sound out of our snare. Now let's move on to making hi-hats. We're gonna use noise. Let's switch this one off. Okay, let's add some 16th heads. Let's duplicate the channel and we're gonna do the same trick, but we're gonna use different noise type this time. Let's add an EQ to cut the necessary unwanted low end. And then let's do a little bit like very basic stereo processing here. So this one gonna be mono and this one gonna be little bit in the stereo. Let's add couple of effects to get different textures of our cymbals. So our loop is almost done. Let's limit the group a little bit and bring the loudness even more out of our drums. So that's all for drums. Please download tracks, use them to create your own drums. That's how we usually make drums. And as a bit of freestyle in the end, let's check out also the bass rack we added to the pack and do a bit of freestyle with the bass.